and who is truly protecting our nation's veterans, despite the fact that they sacrifice everything for it. Even the doctors were taken aback by what Trump did while visiting Walter Reed. As a group of black CVs pulled up to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center on a gloomy Tuesday afternoon, no one had any idea what was going on. There were no reporters, no television crews, and no big statements on social media. Dizziness was par for the course at the hospital, caring for soldiers who had sacrificed so much for their nation, both physically and metaphorically. Doctors and nurses worked with a subtle sense of urgency. Whoever had just entered the building was completely unknown to the majority of them. Donald Trump arrived without the customary acclaim, skipping the news briefings and dazzling lights. He appeared to have turned down his customary intensity, moving with measured steps. Politics wasn't his intention in being here. How this hit close to home. Following a strong handshake, Dr. Samuel Richards, the director of the hospital, escorted him through the halls. "They have no idea you're on your way," he whispered stealthily. "So it might be better that way." With his eyes fixed ahead, Trump merely nodded. I could hear the screech of wheels scraping against the shiny floor of a wheelchair somewhere down the corridor. One of the common rooms was entered by a soldier who had lost both legs. Another sat with his chin lowered, staring at his phone as if an unseen force were pushing down on him. Words say it was completely absorbed by Trump. There was more to this than meets the eye. Looks were irrelevant. Wow, this was entirely new. There was yet more to come, though, and it would render everyone dumbfounded. Fresh bedding and antiseptic wafted down the corridor. There was a mix of muted talk and the hum of medical monitoring. As Trump passed open doors, he caught a glimpse of the soldiers whose bodies bore the marks of war scars from burns, missing limbs, and eyes that spoke volumes. Some of the patients knew who he was. A few of them straightened up. Not everyone knew whether to salute or shake his hand, so they were hesitant. A soldier raised his thumbs up while his left arm was in a sling. A tiny but sincere exchange ensued as Trump reciprocated the gesture. Sergeant Daniel Rice, a 29-year-old with 3 tours of duty in Afghanistan, was the one he stopped at the door of. Even though he lost the lower half of his right leg, his soul was unharmed. With a reassuring, "Didn't expect to see you here, sir," Rice got situated in bed. "The chair was raised by Trump. I wasn't expecting to be here," he said, "but I heard about you guys. Figured I should see for myself." Smirking, Rice continued, "Are they keeping you on a short leash, or do you actually get to walk around?" It was funny. Don't let me walk around as long as I don't cause trouble. They conversed for a few minutes about life in general, avoiding political and policy topics. When the physical therapist at the hospital tried to force Rice to do further rehabilitation, he would laugh about the hospital food and his plans to outpace them all. That seemed ordinary for a while. Trump got to his feet and prepared to depart. "You need anything?" Afterwards, Riaz shook his head in disapproval. "Just keep looking out for guys like us." Before returning to the corridor, Trump firmly patted him on the shoulder. Everything changed, though, when he approached the final room on the right. The hospital has become very noisy. The news had gone out. A few patients got on their wheels and strolled into the hallway. While some leaned on their beds, others peered out their open doors. Whatever their opinion of him may have been positive, negative, or neutral, one thing was evident. Trump was present, and he wasn't moving among the crowd like a politician with a tight agenda. He was about to halt, taking notes. In one chamber, he was seated next to 22-year-old Private First Class Jordan Tate, who wore a new bandage on his scalp. He spoke slowly and deliberately since shrapnel had damaged some of his hearing. "I had plans," Tate whispered, his voice barely audible over the whirring of machinery trailing him. He looked down at his hands and sighed, saying college, maybe law school. "Now, I don't know." Trump drew nearer. "You're young. You've got time to figure it out." A hollow laugh escaped Tate's lips. "Yeah, but what if I can't?" There was a brief moment when Trump remained silent. Finally, he confessed in an unusually forward moment, "I don't have that answer. But I know one thing, you don't quit. You don't let this decide the rest of your life." Ours Tate gave an unreadable nod. "Guess I don't have a choice, huh?" Got to his feet and extended a handshake. "You do, and you make the right one." The chamber that followed was distinct, with his wife and 2 children sitting behind him. 41-year-old Army Ranger Lieutenant Mark Holloway sat up straight. Between his jawline and temple, a lengthy scar ran. The name tag from his uniform remained securely fastened as it hung in the corner. Greeting him with a smile was his wife, Karen. Didn't expect visitors today. Trump raised an eyebrow at the children, who were perhaps 6 and 8 years old. Their expressions were a mix of excitement and fear as they gazed at him with wide eyes. The youngest of the siblings pointed to their father's scar and questioned what happened to him. In the midst of silence, Holloway tousled his son's locks, something that was worth it. With a change in his countenance, Trump observed the discussion. He gave Holloway a solid shake of the hand. "Hell of a family you've got here." With a nod, Karen approved. They're why he fought. Something held Trump there for an extra second as he turned to depart. Finally, as if on autopilot, he murmured, "Make sure they know what he did for them." Karen grinned, but his remarks continued to weigh on her even after he departed. But something that really halted Trump in his tracks was in the room across from him. A lonely man sat in a hospital bed, unintentionally staring at the television, making the room feel cramped compared to the others. Fewer machines and visitors added to the impression. The audio was distorted. Inside, Trump stepped. The Marine took a while to respond. He seemed quite youthful, perhaps 24 or 25 years old. The type of man who had likely run 5 kilometers before sunrise daily for years, short, buzz cut, powerful jawline. At this point, he was perfectly still. "Should I take a seat?" Trump inquired. The Marine's gaze briefly shifted to him before returning to the screen. In response, he simply shrugged. "It's a free country." A chair was raised by Trump. "What's your name?" Corporal Jake Lawson. His voice sounded robotic and overly prepared, as if he had given that same answer 100 times in the earlier weeks. Near the foot of the bed, Trump caught a glimpse of the wheelchair that was parked. "How long have you been here?" With a groan, Lawson rubbed his temples. Since the blast, 3 months, an eerie stillness. "Doctors say you're stuck in that chair." With his jaw clenching, Lawson gave a nod. With a sharpness that could cut steel, he gestured toward the chair and said, "Yeah, they say the spine's done. No more running, no more jumping." I chuckled dryly and said, "And after rehab, maybe a desk job, maybe nothing." But that's a great headline, huh? Marine gives everything, gets nothing. Sitting back, Trump studied him. He had no intention of arguing or encouraging him to maintain an optimistic outlook or persevere. "Nothing any amount of talking could have restored to this child. I will not claim to understand that feeling," Trump ultimately stated. But I'll tell you this, you're not forgotten. A scowl escaped Lawson's lips. That's what they all say. Trump remained unfazed because it's true. The Marine's expression changed. His breath was irregular, and his hands were curled into fists on his lap. He whispered, "You know what I hate? I hate that I'd do it again. That if I had to, I'd take the same damn risk." Trump remained silent. For a moment, he allowed the words to linger. "Politicians weren't the reason I did it," Lawson emphasized. "Didn't do it for medals or handshakes. I did it because it was the right thing to do." And now he gulped hard. "Now I'm just another guy in a wheelchair. Another guy waiting to be forgotten." Trump leaned forward, elbows on knees, for the first time since entering the room. His voice became steadily lower. "You're not just another guy," he remarked quietly. "You're the reason this country still has men willing to fight." Looking aside, Lawson clenched his jaw. With a sigh, Trump tapped his fingers on the armrest. As a further step, he whispered with conviction, "I want to do something for you." Squinting, Lawson scowled. "Like what?" Trump stood up straight and stared him down. "Something no one else will." The rest of the medical staff was dumbstruck by his subsequent statement. Everyone had fallen silent. It was as if not even the buzz of the EKG machines could be heard. Trump remained seated, his hands casually resting on the chair's back. Corporal Jake Lawson fixed his gaze on him, anticipating the customary platitudes, the impersonal assurances, and the meaningless "will attend to you" discourse that had no bearing outside of the confines of the hospital. However, that is not the case. With an intensity that Lawson couldn't quite identify, Trump let out a sharp breath through his nose. "I'm setting up a foundation in your name," stated the man. "Not a charity, not a PR move. A real damn foundation for men like you. Guys who come back and get stuck in some system that forgets about them." An expression of intense concentration crossed Lawson's face. "What? You're not going to rot in this hospital. You're not going to spend the next 10 years wondering if anyone remembers what you gave. I'm making sure you and every other veteran in your position get the rehab, the support, and the future you deserve." A blink from Lawson. The fists that had formed on his hands gradually relaxed. You're serious." At no point did Trump falter. Dead serious. A small group of motionless nurses now stood outside the door that had been slightly ajar. With his arms folded and an expression that couldn't be read, a doctor slumped against the wall. Everybody, including the Marine in the bed across from him, who pretended not to hear, cocked his head ever so slightly. Sir Lawson hesitated before continuing. He was at a loss for words. A break in the deadness was the first sensation he'd had since waking up in this hospital. With any luck, with a hard squeeze, Trump took hold of Lawson's hand. "This isn't for the cameras. This isn't for politics. This is because I can, and because you damn well earned it." Lawson clenched his jaw and swallowed forcefully. Someone murmured from the corridor. Did he just say what I think he said? Something changed in that second, and not only for the people in the room. No one budged for an instant. Something unspoken seemed to be charging the air in the room, making it heavier. It appeared as though even the typical sounds of the hospital, such as the faint hum of footsteps and the whisper of voices, had faded in the background. Then, as if holding her breath, one of the nurses standing outside the door let out a strong sigh. Sheila traded wide-eyed looks with a coworker. The physician stood up straight after slumping against the wall. Captain Jake Lawson, though, was the center of attention. He wasn't the type to let his emotions show. As time in the Marines had made him emotionally distant and numb. Unbelievably, he found himself seated in that hospital bed, blinking fast as his throat struggled to contain mounting sensation. Despite his injuries, he gripped Trump's hand tightly with his fingers. He paused, shook his head, and then gave it another go. I don't know what to say. Instead of saying anything, Trump only nodded. Do your best. At long last, the doctor spoke. With a measured and controlled voice, he said, Mr. Trump, this is not what I expected today. His attitude was almost admiring. Not Trump pivoted to face him. What do you need to make this happen? The physician looked across at Lawson for a moment before responding. Rehab, specialized therapy, and long-term care that the VA doesn't always cover. We do what we can, but it's never enough. Trump wasted no time responding. Then I'll cover what they don't. The room was enveloped in the weight of the words. A younger Marine, whose face was still marked with healing burns, whistled softly in the adjacent bed. Damn, he whispered under his breath. Guess I should have asked for a Ferrari. A wave of mirth alleviated the tension, however. The impact of the recent events lingered. Staff members, physicians, and nurses had assembled outside the room. While few spoke to one another, the others remained frozen in shock. Nurse in her 50s was one of those who put her palm on her chest. She said, I've been here for 20 years, the whole time. I've never seen anything like this. Disrespectfully, a wheelchair-bound soldier wiped his face and turned away a few feet away. Trump stood up straight, make sure he gets what he needs, he told the doctor. And not just him. Every soldier likes him. A sluggish nod came from the doctor. We'll do our part, but Mr. Trump, are you sure about this? Back to Lawson, Trump's eyes darted. As if he were frightened to let go of this moment, the young Marine sat there, still clutching the blankets. I don't make promises I don't keep. After that, he left the room without saying a word. Walking down the hall, Trump turned away from his reflection. The moment's weight clung to him, yet he bore it with the composure of a man accustomed to scrutiny and anticipation. However, this was not a political gathering. There wasn't a press pool standing around to take pictures and write up the tale. All that could be heard were the soft footfalls of medical personnel, the mumbled conversations of wounded soldiers, and the faint odor of antiseptic. Azure, even though they didn't intervene, the looks on the faces of the doctors and nurses who witnessed the conversation said it all. Some appeared appalled, as if struggling to comprehend what had transpired. Others merely gazed. He went by a wheelchair-bound Vietnam veteran beside the window on his way to the main corridor of the hospital. The weathered soldier's face bore significant wrinkles, and his sparse hair retained hints of its original rich brown. His knees supported his calloused and weathered hands. The man rasped, Mr. President, as he stopped Trump in his tracks. The president pivoted. After giving him a long look, the veteran nodded, but not out of adoration or mindless allegiance. Rather, he seemed to comprehend. They won't forget this. Trump briefly averted his eyes. His next comment was a simple good. That concluded it. Keep quiet. No elaborate goodbye. With the help of his security team, he pushed open the door and went out into the chilly afternoon air. Did that really just happen? A hospital employee whispered to himself as he stood near the entrance. However, upon returning to that hospital room, Corporal Jake Lawson remained still, gazing up at the ceiling while firmly grasping the blankets, as if clinging to something that had not seemed genuine for an extended while. That was never reported in the news. No news stories surfaced and no videos went viral. Nobody's going to analyze every word. Things had changed, though, in Walter Reed's serene hallways. The doctors discussed it in private during their breaks. It was a memorable experience for the nurses who had witnessed it directly. The warriors who had endured weeks, months, or even years of feeling like irrelevant artifacts experienced a long-lost emotion recognition. Life did not magically become easier for Corporal Jake Lawson. He still had a long road of rehabilitation ahead of him, filled with times of anger as he stared at his immobile legs, and he wasn't the only one. There was a true foundation, just like Trump had promised. A few short weeks later, it was beginning to take shape, providing money for specialized rehabilitation programs and career training to guys like Lawson, so they might have something more than a folded flag and a list of benefits that barely covered their basic living expenses. Ellie went on from there. Veterans who had listened in on that discussion also began to speak up. Stories of people who had sacrificed so much and received so little began to surface. The domino effect extended beyond the confines of Walter Reed, Washington, and even politics. Because this wasn't fundamentally about party boundaries or policies, the subject was considerably less complex, the fulfillment of a vow. Perhaps the true takeaway is that language is simple. Orations are practiced. What matters most, though, is when a man keeps his word, when he looks someone in the eyes and proclaims, "You're not forgotten," and then does it. Perhaps further symbolic actions are unnecessary. Perhaps more false promises aren't necessary. Perhaps greater action is required. Thank you for watching this video and taking the time to reflect on this powerful story. The sacrifices made by our veterans deserve to be remembered, and the actions that honor them should never be forgotten. This is more than just a story. It's a reminder of the promises that must be kept, the support that must be given, and the gratitude that must always be shown. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any future videos. Here, we share the most compelling, heartfelt, and thought-provoking stories that inspire, challenge, and remind us of the values that truly matter. Your support means everything, and it helps us continue bringing you more impactful stories like this. Stay tuned for even better and more fascinating stories that will move your heart, spark meaningful conversations, and keep you engaged. Thank you again for being part of this journey. We'll see you in the next one.